Okay, this is Sociology, lesson number 3 on society and culture. Uh, this is the fourth lecture in this lesson, and we started off already defining sociology, society. We said it's a group of people who live in a certain territory, so territory is one thing, are subject to a common political authority, who have a common identity or culture, and that's what we're going to focus on today is culture, and with established patterns of social interactions. And that's where we started. We first examined social interactions. We said although social forces are sources of social interaction, we went through a number of examples of social interaction, and then we emphasized influence because influence is important. And it's important, for example, in freedom, our fundamental freedom. We all think we're free because we live in America, but there's a lot of limitations to our freedom, for better or worse. But a fundamental type of freedom, which people don't consider typically, is the fact that if you are influenced and you don't know it, can you say you're really free if you're being controlled? Anyways, so we went through examples of influence. Now, today I want to go through culture. All right, that's today's lesson. Okay, there's 4 main elements to culture. Culture is this: a way of life shared by a group of people. So it's a way of life. Key elements are language is important. In our culture, it's English is the dominant language, not the only language. Norms, which are normal ways of doing things and normal ways of seeing things. And values, what we hold dear, what's desirable, what's a goal, right or wrong. And then material. Okay? So language is kind of along the lines of symbolic interaction. Norms are along the line of Durkheim and functionalism. Remember Durkheim had the concept of anomie, which means without norms. It's a state of anxiousness and uncertainty due to rapid social change. Values, Weber emphasized values, Durkheim also with anomie. Material, Marx was a materialistic guy, the dialectic materialism. All right. So what I want to start with here is with language, right? We're going to talk about the power of words, why language is important, linguistic reality, how language impacts upon our perceptions, impact of words on cognitive reality, and linguistic relativity, different perceptions based upon different languages, different language abilities, and so forth. Okay. So first thing I want to cover is the power of words. All right. There's an old saying: "The pen is mightier than the sword." All right. It's an old saying, kind of cliche. What does it mean? So here you got a sword, right? Pen, right? Which one would win? The old saying is the pen is mightier. Well, why is the pen mightier than the sword? Because it's the pen that controls the sword. It's the pen that creates the plans, that creates the ideas to create conflict, to take nations to war. It's the pen that motivates people. It's the pen that creates propaganda, right? So language drives thoughts, and thoughts drives a hand that wields the sword, right? So it's the language and thoughts that drive our actions, to wield the sword. Language creates ideologies, it creates propagandas, it creates policies that create wars, plans, congressional resolutions. We talked about all these already, right? So for example, all right, the plan to get us into the Iraq War resolution, the scheme for that, right? A meticulously planned strategy. It was planned out, right? The Gulf of Tonkin plan. Well, the plan was actually left behind, the 30-day plan, right? Pearl Harbor attack, right? And then all the detonators that I showed you, okay? So thoughts, plans, propaganda, words. Okay, now another reason why words are powerful is because writing increases the range of communication and spread of knowledge in both space and time. Okay, so you can transmit knowledge across space, across distances, right? You can transmit it across time from generation to generation or thousands of years. For example, we'll take the Bible, right? The Bible's written, I don't know, Moses wrote it, about 3,000 years ago or so, or two to 3,000 years ago. The first books, and then the Gospels were written about roughly 2,000 years ago. All right, but still today the Bible can have powerful impact. So I want to give an example. So language extends knowledge over space and time, right? So space, things can be said over the internet. Information can be spread, knowledge can be spread, disinformation can be spread. Here's an example that uses the idea of a sword here. So the Word of God, this is from Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12. The Word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword, and piercing as far as the division of soul and spirit, of both joints and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. All right, so it's saying that the Word of God, the Bible here, is like a two-edged sword, a sharp two-edged sword. It's powerful like that, able to divide joint from marrow, okay, soul from spirit. And so this can teach us, this can inform us. 2,000 years ago when this is written, it can still inform us today and have meaning, right? So the idea behind it, the way I understand it is, from my knowledge of physiology, joints have no blood, right? There's no blood vessels in a joint. You had blood vessels right there, between in that joint. They'd all be chewed up and ground up like powder in a mortar and pestle. And then you'd be bleeding out constantly in your joints, right? So instead, your joints are surrounded by what's called a synovial capsule, and then it's filled with this synovial fluid, right? And the blood vessels extend to the synovial capsule, right? And from there, it transmits nutrients in and takes waste out, all right? But it's all passed and circulated through the synovial fluid, which is like a lubricant, almost like oil for an engine, all right? All right, so there's no blood in here. Now marrow is different because that's where blood is made. Okay, so there's no blood here. Here's where blood is made, so it's loaded with blood, right? The key point is, according to the ancient Hebrews, right, they understood blood as the life of the flesh. That was the meaning of that, right? In fact, it says 3 times in the Old Testament, I know it says in Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus that do not eat the blood with the flesh because the blood is the life of the flesh, right? So that's the idea, that's the understanding, right? Now, why that's important is the soul is compared to the joint, no blood. And the word for soul in Greek is push, which is that immaterial aspect of humans, which we share in common with animals, right? That makes us no better than an animal, honestly. In fact, humans can be worse than animals, more destructive, more harmful, more vicious, sinister. We share in common with animals that animates us, drives us, motivates us to satisfy who? Self, right? The push is the self. It is a source of our fleshiness, the nasty baseness, meanness, venality, ignobility of humanity, right? This is our worst part of ourselves. The push leads only to death. Okay, no life, no blood. All right. Whereas the opposite is a spirit. So the Word of God can separate these two, right? Separate the nasty soulishness, right? And fill us with God's Spirit. So the Spirit, if we make the choice, if we make the effort, I'm not saying I have. Spirit is pneuma, which is God's Spirit given to us through the infilling of the Holy Spirit, which is the true life of the flesh, and that's the true blood, which is eternal life. And eternal life is not life, forever in time. Eternal life is God, is the perfect goodness of God instilled within us that we can only have as God resides within us. All right, so the Bible can teach us that from 2,000 years ago. All right. So that's another reason why that language has power, because language can transmit knowledge over space and time. Also, permanence and accumulation of knowledge. So, if knowledge couldn't be recorded, we'd have to reinvent the wheel every generation. So it's passed down from generation to generation, and then you expand upon it, you build upon it, right? And that's how our body of knowledge keeps expanding and growing, and it's because we base it upon past knowledge. We take what we've learned already, right, and go further. We take our knowledge and increase the abilities due to our knowledge to create more knowledge. So to show that, I'll go back to the scientific method. Remember how the scientific method, you have that inductive or deductive inductive cycle. So this is all deduction here. Then you start induction here. All right. You start with prior knowledge, and then you go through the cycle, and you expand your knowledge. You increase your knowledge. So this is the process through which we continually improve our knowledge. All right, and we ensure that the knowledge we make is good knowledge. All right. So progress in knowledge, the steady, I should say steady, march forward, right, requires one, building upon past knowledge, which is a priori, right, or deductive, right, and or novel synthesis of existing knowledge to create new knowledge. So to create new knowledge, you're either expanding upon prior knowledge or you're synthesizing, right, in creative ways that increases understanding. And both of these require knowledge to be recorded, right? Knowledge to be passed on. So books are a great means for that. Sharing knowledge that has been, so that you don't have to continuously reinvent the wheel, and you make progress. All right. So now permanence of knowledge, and the reason why language is important in creating the permanence of knowledge is because our minds are very limited. We went through that whole section in the first lesson on cognitive limitations, how limited our brains are. We think our brains are so good, right? Their brains are as good as a computer. Well, not even close. In some ways our brains are good, but in a lot of ways our brains are very limited. And that's common for humanity. All right, and one of the ways is we talked about awareness or your short-term memory and how you can only maintain a few things in your head at a time. And when it comes to complex things, you're focused on, you're down to like one thing at a time. I know I am, right? I can focus on one complex thing at a time, and I got to move on to the next, right? Now, given it, it's hard to see the whole big picture. So here's some examples of diagrams I drew to establish permanence and so that we can see the big picture. Because there's permanence here, right? You write it down, and you can kind of connect things together and see how they fit and so forth, and you can rearrange these and organize it based upon interrelationships and whatnot. And I did 3 analyses, and I did these really fast, just over about 2.5 hours. Right? I did this diagram in about an hour. I did this diagram in less than an hour, and I did this one in 15 minutes. Oh, wait, is it? Oh, yeah, 15 minutes it took me, right, to do this. And so I have these all on the top of my head, right? But it's still, I understand this stuff. It's on the top of my head, but I cannot, visualize it all at the same time. I cannot correlate and correspond and organize this, right? And then what does that result in? Ineffective and useless jumble, right? So it helps to diagram it out. So let me go through this. I'll go through one example real quick. All right. So I did 3 of these, like I said, less than 2.5 hours, right? I just blew these out. All right, so this is on factors that cause oil price, that affect oil price, right? Obviously it goes through supply and demand, the market. Anyways, okay, so oil, first thing is real general world oil reserve volume, right? And the world oil reserve volume is not necessarily what it is, right? But what's known. Right? You got to discover this stuff. You have to do exploration, right? So oil production, and this is dependent not only on existing reserves, but on production capacity, right? So you have reserve volume, and that also, another factor is oil production capacity. If you know of it, if you don't have the capacity to pump it out of the ground and ship and transport it, then doesn't do any good. So oil production capacity of individual nations. Saudi Arabia, for example, is one of the few countries that has massive excess production capacity. I mean, I don't know what they're producing today. They're probably producing upwards near 10 million barrels per day, I'm guessing. All right. But it used to be, back in, like Gulf War time, they're producing, I think their OPEC quota was 3.5 million barrels per day, right? And at that time, they had a capacity of 10 million barrels per day. So they had triple the capacity that they're actually producing, right? So, depending upon the volume of reserves, then that filters through the production capacity. That affects supply, which affects price. All right. I don't know how I should do this. I guess I'll go from here. So I don't know why I have national debt, poverty, unemployment. I can't remember this. Oh, this can lead to political instability, right? Okay, so this is another factor. So if you have, let's say, a big national debt, you have a lot of poverty, you have unemployment. Let's say you have social instability, right? That can result in political instability, right? Which may pressure a country, let's say, I don't know, Nigeria or something like that, some poor African country that's an oil producer, right? It may cause them to overproduction of oil, to increase revenues, which then drives down oil price. So because of the situation within their country, right, if they have political instability, right, and they feel they need to increase oil production, to increase revenues for the country, to improve the economy, then they may overproduce. But then this has an effect of driving down oil prices, which then can backfire. Anyways, so political instability national political considerations. So this is one of the national political considerations. All right. So another would be sanctions against oil-producing countries, export restrictions, decrease in supply. So, for example, we had long sanctions against Iran, right? And then finally we had the Iran deal, all right, in 2000. What was that? 2000. When did that go through? When was that voted? About 2015, I guess. All right, so they finally voted on that. I think about 2015, and now Iran came back online. Right, they had a big boost in supply. Right, which is a factor driving down price. Okay, that is a big factor on OPEC considerations, for example. Or embargoes against oil importing nations, like 1973 crisis. So that affected supply to the United States when Arab nations embargoed us, right? And this was due to national political considerations. For example, in this case, it was the Arabs being pissed off because we kept Israel on their feet. They're about to go under in the Yom Kippur War. Another national political consideration could be economic warfare. For example, the economic warfare practiced by Saudi Arabia and Kuwait against Iran during the Iran-Iraq War, when both Saudi Arabia and Kuwait were assisting Iraq, right? But also that resulting in driving up Iraqi debt, which became problematic after the war. All right. So the idea is they overproduced, right, to drive down price. Now, because they're overproducing, they didn't have a big revenue loss, but in driving down price, they caused a huge revenue loss for Iran. And revenues is the means of financing the war, right? So overproduction to drive down price, all right? Now I say, one of the reasons why you can do that is to undercut revenues of an enemy nation, like for example Iran, right? You want to undermine their source of revenue, so you overproduce to drive down price, where you get the benefit from overproduction, but they get hammered especially if they have production restrictions, price falling. Or you want to drive out a competitor. For example, you want to drive marginally profitable oil producers out of the market, right? And this is the good old-fashioned method that what's his face, Rockefeller used, to make Standard Oil into a monopoly, right? He would establish monopolies in certain market areas, right? And then jack up price well above to get excessive profits, and then he used those excessive profits to subsidize underpricing in a competitive market in which he wants to drive out competitors, right? And once he does that, he establishes a monopoly and drives up price there, right? So, example I can give you is I don't know, U.S. shale producers, the tight oil, the fracking oil, right? So that's a new technology made possible by slant drilling and so forth, and then they use high pressure water to force out the oil and natural gas, right? For example, let's say their profit margins aren't as good as Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's got great oil reserves. It comes out under pressure. It's easy to pump out. Let's say hypothetically that Saudi Arabia can produce oil at $20 a barrel, right? Let's say the market price is $60 a barrel, and the current market price is $60 per barrel, and let's say the American producers can produce oil at $50 per barrel, right? So what Saudi Arabia may try to do is, and what they did for a while to try to drive out the competition, was to underprice the frackers, right? To overproduce, to drive down price below the point which the frackers can make a profit, right? And hopefully to drive them out of business, right? Well, that's not as easy to do as you think, right? And often what they do is they'll cut back a little bit, shift all the resources to the more profitable wells, right? And stay afloat, right? Anyways, and then it's almost you can say it's almost like a strike where, it's who can hold the breath the longest, right? Because by driving down price, of course, Saudi Arabia is also losing revenues. Oil import quota restrictions decrease supply in domestic market, but increase supply in the world market. Okay, so example was for a long time. Import quota restrictions. Well, another thing, I don't think I have it here, but you can have export quota restrictions. U.S. had until fairly recently, until about 2016, I believe, right? The U.S. had a restriction against exporting oil, largely to conserve U.S. oil revenues. But things change. We're discovering more and more fracking reserves, so they're allowing for export now, but this can affect the balance of trade, which can affect dollar values, right? Petrodollars equal the primary currency. Okay, so that's another factor, the petrodollar, right? What do I have here? Okay, national strategic reserves. Okay, so I think I'll come back to this. So cartels like OPEC and organized production restrictions to increase price, to increase profits. All right, that's what OPEC does, right? That's what cartels do. They get together, they set quotas on production, right? It's called pro-rationing. Ration out who gets to produce so much, right? And if you get everyone to agree to those quotas, right, you can control production, right, which controls supply, which they can be used to drive up price, to increase your revenues, increase your profits. Right. What do I have here? National strategic reserves. All right. There will be a short-term impact upon oil supply as reserves are drawn down or built up. All right. So yeah, we have oil reserves. All right. Remember we talked about Japan having 6 months oil reserves. Well, the U.S. has oil reserves as well. It used to be. I'm not sure what it is today, but it used to be 90 days. Right, 3 months of oil in case exports were cut off. Right now, you can draw down on those. If, for example, there's fluctuation in the market and prices are really high, then the president can order that the reserves be drawn down. You tap those reserves and start drawing them down, using them, right, to increase supply, drive down prices, right, or vice versa. You can build them up, which would decrease supply and drive up price. Oil company reserves and tankers. So this is public strategic reserves, national strategic. But the oil companies also have reserves, and typically they hold them in either tanks on land, or in a lot of cases they just hold them in shipping tankers. All right, where are we at here? Okay, so oil price then affects global economy, right? So a big factor in the global economy, and it's actually a diminishing factor as we advance technologically, and as new aspects of the new markets, new aspects of the economy emerge based upon high tech, based upon information, based upon communication, so forth, right? Which do not require physical shipping, for example, right? As those portions of the economy grow, percentage-wise, right, that diminishes the overall importance of oil, right? So it's less of a factor, but it used to be huge. But it's still a huge factor because a lot of things still have to be transported. I don't know what's a good example. Uh, let's say you got an area that grows pineapples, all right? All right, let's say Hawaii, right? They grow a lot of pineapples, right? Well, they can't eat all the pineapples there, all right? You got to transport them. So to expand their production, to expand their volume, and expand their revenues, right? You have to transport, right? You're very limited. If you just limit it to the local market, you're very limited. I taught at a town where they had a Winnebago factory, right? You produce a lot of Winnebagos there, but not everyone's going to buy a Winnebago there, right? So you have to transport them, right? So basically, your economy is based upon commerce, and commerce requires transportation, right? So even though the percentage, the importance of oil is falling, right? It's still important, right? So oil price affects the global economy. This is the 400-pound gorilla in the room, the big factor in both oil price and demand. Okay, the economy itself. This is a big factor in both supply and demand. Alternative fuels will decrease demand, so the more we go to alternative fuels, for example, whatever the alternative fuels are, whether it's like biodiesel or whether it's electric cars, right? And I think the big growth area in the future is going to be electric cars, right? Especially with improvements in battery technology. All right, and the cost, right? The cost advantages, the cost savings you can get with electric cars, from energy, but also maintenance, and also production, right? Electric cars are far simpler to build, right? Far less moving parts, right? And support systems, right? You don't need water pumps and all right. Okay. Yeah. So as you get more alternative fuels, whether it's biodiesel or electric cars, right, that can affect demand, right? Hopefully have a positive effect upon fuel prices. Alternative energies will decrease demand, right? So alternative energies, wind and solar, so forth, right? In the United States, we have very low reliance on oil for electricity production. I mean, the only place that was really large and still is very large is Hawaii. Although Hawaii is making big inroads in converting to renewable energy, right, to decrease their reliance upon oil, right? But Hawaii is a landlocked. It's an island, right? And I guess the most efficient fuel for energy production has been oil, but they're moving towards renewable. Winter temperatures, depending upon the winter temperature, that will affect heating oil demand, right? So taxes on oil consumption decreases demand, but can also increase the input cost for companies, making them less competitive. All right, new technologies to increase fuel efficiency and conservation decrease demand. So new technologies that increase fuel efficiency of, for example, cars or conservation measures, whether it's increased mileage per car or whether it's improved building standards for construction that have better insulation, which decrease heating oil consumption, right? So oil price can affect investments. If oil price goes up, that'll increase the amount of investment investment increase oil price. Investment increased oil prices attracts more investments, right? And then increased oil price encourages development of marginally profit oil fields. So, if price goes up, then those fields that are marginally profitable become suddenly profitable. New technology for oil exploration extraction. So if price goes up, right, that will result in increased investment, right? That investment will go to developing new technologies, right, for oil exploration and extraction. And those technologies have panned out. For example, the slant drilling, right, combined with hydraulic fracking, right, increased access to difficult to extract oil like the tight oil, deep sea oil, shale oil, tight oil, right, and fracking, right. So new technologies make that possible, make all these possible, right. Increases the supply, right, driving down price. This is a big factor. This is the big factor that OPEC is facing. More than Iran coming back. Iran coming back is a complication for them, but I think that what they're really running into is U.S. fracking. We're kicking up capacity. Plus, we're exporting onto the world market now, so it's not just affecting U.S. Market prices, but also new technologies to increase. I went into it already. All right, so all these are factors that affect oil price. Okay, and this is just a diagram I wrote down in an hour, right? If I spent more time, I could figure out other factors. All right, but as it is, right, it's a complex array of factors, and you can't keep all these in your mind. So the importance of language is, right, you write it down, you get a sense of permanence. You can see it. You can then I can like move this here to there, right, and I can connect things together, and then you create better understanding and so forth. And like I said, I just rushed this out in an hour. So this one was in less than an hour, and this one I did in 15 minutes or less. Right? Okay. All right, so that's, power of words, right? Pen is mightier than sword, increases the range of communication, space and time. It also allows for permanence and accumulation of knowledge, right? Allows us to keep improving our knowledge. All right, the next factor for language is linguistic reality, right? The impact of words on cognitive reality, which is the only reality you know. So the only reality we know is a reality in our heads, right? That's cognitive reality. That reality consists of our perceptions and understanding. If we don't perceive and understand something, it's not real for us, even though it could be right in front of our face. It has great impact upon us, right? But if we don't see it, it doesn't exist, right? But only as far as it doesn't exist, but only as far as we know. So whether or not we perceive and understand things depends largely upon our extent of knowledge. And the reason why our knowledge consists largely of concepts, and those concepts are rooted in words and are defined in words and have meaning in words, right? Which is language. So concepts are the tools we use to analyze and understand the world. Concepts are words and are defined in words, right? If you don't know a word, chances are you won't know the concept, and then chances are you won't perceive it. It'll just go past you. And the understanding of this idea goes, you can say goes back to the Bible. In the Bible, there's two main words for the word word in Greek. One is rhema, the other is logos. Logos actually means the first immaterial intelligence or thought, right? So it's the idea that thought is based upon language. Especially complex thought is all rooted in words, right? Which means the complexity of your thought is largely depends upon your language skills, and that's why English is probably the most important language course that young people will take in school, right? Examples. Give me an example is irredenta, right? Irredenta. Now, this is just a simple example. So here's the word irredenta, and I pick it because I expect very few people will know what it means, right? So what is an irredenta? Right. An irredenta is a bit of territory which is in one country, but really should belong to another. For example, let's say it's a bit of territory between Germany and France that's within Germany, but really should belong in France, or vice versa. It doesn't matter, right? So based upon nationality, national identity, ethnicity, what language they use, culture, right? All those would make those people identify with France. Yet that territory politically is in Germany, right? Well, that situation has historically created a lot of problems, right? There's a lot of resentment, instability. There's conflict, war, and that territory is fought over. It's passed back and forth, over the years and so forth, right? So this has been a big source of war. To better understand that what's going on, you have to have that word in mind. Now let me give you another example. Fait accompli, right, is a term, all right? Now, what it means is, I guess it's Latin, right? One of those old classic concepts in Latin. It means an accomplished fact, right? And what it actually is, it's an old diplomatic maneuver to force a result will have to happen, right? And I've seen this maneuver done, many times in European wars. For example, done in the Franco-Prussian War to get that war kicked off, right? Done in the wars of Italian unification to get those wars kicked off, right? And those wars having big effects because the Franco-Prussian War allowed for the unification of Germany, right? The unification of those Prussian states. Those are little principalities to join together to form Germany, which shifted the balance of power. The wars of Italian unification that helped again, the principalities in Italy join together and unify. Cutting off oil to Japan, what you could say was an accomplished fact, a fait accompli. We knew that we cut off oil to Japan, they're going to have to go to war, right? So when we did it, we forced their hand, right? And just like Secretary Stimson said, we had to maneuver them into attacking us, and we did, right? For Iraq WMD inspection. So I'll give you an example of a fait accompli that Scott Ritter spoke about in his book, Iraq Confidential, right? So here's Scott Ritter. Here's his book, Iraq Confidential. A little background on Scott Ritter is, let's see. Scott Ritter, where do I have more background on this? I guess I'll go here. Wait, where's it at here? All right, yeah, Scott Ritter. So Scott Ritter was the chief United Nations weapons inspector on the ground in Iraq, hunting down weapons of mass destruction between 1991 and 1998. He was there 7 years, right? While he was doing this, he was an active serving Marine Corps officer. I believe he was a major. He was an intelligence officer in General Schwarzkopf's staff during the first Gulf War. Following this, while still commissioned as an officer, Scott Ritter served as a United States weapons inspector, searching for weapons, WMD in Iraq between 1991 and 1998, right? And he says a whole slew of stuff and how corrupt it all was. So let me explain this to you. Let's see. So he said that this is one of the many incidents that occurred, which anyways, I'll try to explain it in a bit here. So he was chief UN weapons inspector on the ground in Iraq, 1991 to 1998, and a serving Marine Corps officer. A guy named Richard Butler, who was a supervisor, came to him, right? And he said it was coming from Sandy Berger, who was Clinton's national security advisor. He said, this is coming straight from Sandy Berger. And so he goes to Scott Ritter, and then he draws on the whiteboard a timeline with a 1 and a 15, March 1st and March 15th. So here's March 1st, March 15th. Right? Then he circles 15, and then he circles 8. He writes 8 and circles 8. And he says, we want to attack, we want to bomb Iraq on the 15th because that's a Muslim holiday, right? Started a Muslim holiday, right? So we want to bomb them on their religious holiday. And to do that, we need to have an inspection on the 8th, right? At least by the 8th, right? And he said, what you're going to do is this. When you get on the ground in Iraq, you're going to demand that we inspect the Iraq Ministry of Defense, right? Which is like their Pentagon. Our Pentagon is like their Ministry of Defense, you know. Highly sensitive, right? You don't want your enemy running around. You know, we don't want Iraq people running around in our Pentagon, possibly gathering intelligence and whatnot. So he said this. He said, Butler said, Saddam Hussein's right-hand man, Tariq Aziz, said that the Iraq Ministry of Defense, their Pentagon, is off limits. To inspect that would mean war, right? So, you know, you go in with, let's say, a list of stated sites you want to inspect, right? But, you know, you hit them, right? You blindside them with, we want to inspect the Ministry of Defense. Right, you arrive on scene, the demand inspection of the Ministry of Defense. Butler said, Aziz can't back down. He said, you know, it would mean war, right? Then when they refuse, we'll take the refusal and use it as our justification for bomb. So you try to set up a fait accompli. You know, right, that they're gonna reject this, right? So you demand that you inspect that. Now, to the average American public, they're like, what? You know, they're not even thinking what that means, right? And they'll probably see it as, oh, see, they're trying to conceal and hide, right? And it'll be justified in their minds, right? So you know that they're going to have to reject this, right? And when they reject it, right, you know that you can use that as a pretext to bomb, right? And you know that the American public's going to say, okay, yeah, that's reasonable, right? They reject it, they try to, you know, prevent an inspection. Well, we should bomb them, right? But you also know that if you bomb them on a Muslim holiday, it's got a high chance of jacking people up. All right. So let's see here. Then when they refuse, we'll use that as our justification for bombing. But Iraq backed down, allowed inspections, and then nothing's found. Right? We go in, you know, inspect, you find nothing. After this, and after 7 years of inspections, Iraq stopped cooperating. Right? Then the UN and U.S. pulled out weapons inspectors. That was in August, I believe. Right around August, they pulled them out. Right? So they weren't kicked out; they pulled them out, right? And then they bombed Iraq for 3 days in December 17th, 18th, I think 18th, 19th, 20th, or maybe 4 days, right? No, 17th, 18th, 19th they bombed, 3 days, I believe. The 20th was Ramadan, their main religious holiday. So they got their bombing on the holiday, you know, their big holiday in this case, right? So one way or another, they got their bombing on the holiday. What's the purpose of bombing them on their holiday? I don't know. You know, I'm thinking it's to jack them up. If there was an Al-Qaeda terrorist attack on Christmas, you know Americans would be like crazy pissed off. So they're playing dirty games with weapons inspections. They played a lot more dirty games with weapons inspections, right? When the fear of WMD was used to justify the economic sanctions, which led to the death of 567,000 Iraqi children, okay? So we played dirty games with weapons inspections when it was those weapons inspections that justified these economic sanctions, right? Which resulted in the death of all these children. Over 500,000 children died, right? According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, right? And that became one of bin Laden's chief motives behind his 9/11 attacks. So that worked out great. All right, so let's see here. I want to just briefly expand upon some of the dirty things that were done, more than just this case, right? So here's just a short list, and I'll give you an even more expanded list as we go on. But this will just be a starter. So Scott Ritter said that U.S. meddling with WMD inspections between 1991 to 1998, right? It was U.S. government and CIA, right? Were not really interested in finding WMD, right? Their goal was to maintain the perception in the public mind that Saddam and Iraq were concealing WMD in order to justify continuance of sanctions, stranglehold economic sanctions, which would create conditions so horrific that they would foment an internal revolution and thus overthrow Saddam. Right? So the idea is to use these sanctions to make things so bad over there, right, that the people finally overthrow Saddam themselves. So the purpose of them was regime change, okay, according to Scott Ritter. However, as a result of those sanctions, 567,000 Iraqi kids died, right? And that was one of the key factors that led bin Laden to attack us on 9/11, which then kicked off the war on terror. All right. So he said that the U.S. government, CIA, refused to give assistance in UN WMD inspections, and in fact did things to obstruct their efforts. I'll show you that. I'll show you more detail in a second. And I'll show you quotes from his book, and I'll scan through it so you can read through them. Right? I'm not going to go through all his quotes, but I'll just scroll through them so that you can pause and read the whole damn thing if you want. Attempted to use WMD inspections of Saddam's palaces to get assassination attempts on Saddam, to assassinate Saddam. Attempted to use WMD inspections to launch coups in an attempt to overthrow Saddam. Right? I'll explain some of these, I guess. Used WMD inspections to justify bombing Iraq. So that was the case. I told you the fait accompli where you jam them with a demand to inspect a place you know they're going to resist and reject, right? And when they reject it, you use that to bomb them. But they backed down, actually. So they allowed us into their Ministry of Defense, and we found nothing. All right. So what is this? Refused assistance in WD inspections and shell game. All right. So I guess what I have here is, one of the things Scott Ritter thought was this. He said that they've been in Iraq for so many years and they found nothing. That what he came to believe is, well, maybe they're possibly they have an elaborate, effective system to transport stuff. We're finding nothing. Maybe here's an example. So he flies into Baghdad. He lays down a list of spots he wants to inspect. Maybe a spot here, whatever, right? Let's say it's over here. Well, he gives them the list, and he's afraid that they may be, the reason why they're not finding stuff at this point over here and all the other places is because, well, maybe they're moving stuff like a shell game really fast. They're packing it up and hiding it. So what Scott Ritter did, with no help from the CIA, and I'll show you how they obstructed him, right? He tried to organize U-2 flights over the area, right? So have these ready over there, flying over, so that you can look down with your cameras, right? Record any truck movements, any rail movements, whatever, right? Any activity to load things, forklifts, lifting stuff on the trucks and whatnot, right? And then he set up a tie with British intelligence units that were embedded in Iraq, right? Who were intercepting communications, right? So they would intercept radio signals, okay? And then he coordinated that with Israeli cryptologists because the CIA was not helping him. The CIA didn't help him with recording the communication, right? And so he had to set up Israeli cryptologists to decode them, those messages. So these messages were just in case, he lands in Baghdad, whatever, and hands him a list. We want to inspect this place here, and they get on their radio and they send a coded message, right? Move those weapons out now, right? So he wants to have U-2 spy planes over there. He wants to be able to have the ability to capture any and all radio communication, right? And if it's encoded, to have the Israelis decode it for him, right? So this is all stuff that Scott Ritter is setting up. He's a driving force behind here. He was pushing hard to find WMD, and he's getting resistance and no help from the CIA. He's getting obstruction. And then here's an example of a coup attempt. They're going to use inspection to kick off a coup attempt. So communicate, coordinate with coup plotters. So the CIA was communicating and coordinating with coup plotters. I believe there's, as I recall from memory, there's about 800 people within the coup organization who wanted to overthrow Saddam. And the CIA is working with them, trying to set up a coup, right? Where they overthrow Saddam, they kill Saddam or arrest him, whatever, probably just kill him, right? So what they did is they wanted to set up a weapons inspection as a fait accompli, right? And in the same manner as in March 2008, right? You pick a place you know they're going to reject, right? And when they reject it, you use that to justify your bombing. And what they wanted to bomb was they wanted to bomb some key targets. One of which, a key target was the Iraqi Special Republican Guard, right? The Republican Guard were their elite fighting force, almost like, I guess, like a special forces type thing, right? They're their elites, right? But the Special Republican Guard were Saddam Hussein's bodyguard unit, right? So he had a big military force just as bodyguards, right? And the idea is when you set up a weapons inspection, WMD, right? You know they're going to reject it. When they reject it, you use that to justify bombing of their Iraq's Special Republican Guard headquarters, right? Saddam's personal bodyguard force. When these guys are taken out, right, that opens the path to a coup, and you overthrow Saddam. You cut the head off the snake of his bodyguard protection, right? So with Saddam's protection taken out, you launch the coup. All right, so that was supposed to happen in June of 1996, but the Iraqi intelligence agency got wind of this first through a number of means. So I know this seems far-fetched maybe to the average person. No, U.S. wouldn't do that. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll let you read through this if you want. I'll scroll slowly. All right. The idea behind this is, all right. Remember when we talked about the manipulation method to get us into the Iraq invasion war, and how that's centered upon weapons of mass destruction, which never existed, and how that was a chief fear generator, right? You also had terrorists among us. That was another fear generator. Terrorists are out there. They're living among us, right? But weapons of mass destruction was a key generator. That was a key fear thing. Oh, he's going to get a nuclear weapon. 9/11 is going to be nothing compared to, when Saddam gets a nuclear weapon and gives the terrorists, or chemical weapons or biological weapons, which didn't exist. All right. So his book shows how, the CIA were not concerned about, and the U.S. government were not concerned about discovering weapons of mass destruction. They're more concerned about maintaining the perception within the American public and within Congress, the legislators, and that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and was concealing them, hiding them, right? And they, in fact, obstructed his efforts. So here's a little bit of background on Scott Ritter, right? He was a super patriotic guy, very strong right-wing Republican, very patriotic, right? But he's an honest guy, right? That's a key thing here. He's not about just waving a flag and distorting things to help him feel good, Okay, so summary of Ritter. So here's a summary of Ritter's book, right? What I want to do, I want to get down here to create. All right, so I guess I'll read this whole thing. The U.S. did not want UN Special Commission to find WMD, UN SCOM inspections to succeed. Disarmament was not the goal because that would end the economic sanctions, which were intended to make living conditions so horrific as to promote regime change. So they didn't really want to disarm Iraq, right? The goal, according to Ritter, right, was getting rid of Saddam. That was a key goal. The real goal, according to Ritter, was the maintenance of public perceptions that Iraq was deceiving and retaining WMD. Right? This would create fear. Specifically, this false public perception would be used to justify continuation of the stringent economic sanctions that were creating such a humanitarian crisis so bad, so severe, it will lead the people of Iraq to overthrow Saddam, right, in a coup, and then get regime change, right? That's a lot of wishful thinking all along the way, right? You know it's going to create conflict. It's going to create, and this is the sort of thing that did create, that motivated Al Qaeda. This program to manipulate U.S. public perception continued through 2003 and was used to manipulate the U.S. public into accepting the U.S. military invasion of Iraq. And of course, it worked, and we invaded, which not only made Iraq a hellhole, but destabilized the larger region as well. So it complicated the problem. It made a bigger terrorist threat. It expanded the terrorist threat, made it a worldwide jihadist movement. It was stated by both the Bush and Clinton administration that even with 100% disarmament, the U.S. had no intention on lifting the sanctions, which were imposed specifically to force elimination of WMD. So the purpose of these sanctions through the United Nations was the elimination of WMD, right? And what the administration is saying is, even if we eliminate it, we're not getting rid of those sanctions. To create the U.S. public belief that Iraq was deceiving and concealing WMD, the U.S. manipulated, suppressed, and fairly undermined the inspection process. Specifically, what the U.S. did is, one, they manufactured false evidence both on WMD and Scud missiles, right? What I want to show you is I have all of this in Scott Ritter's testimony, right? He gives evidence and testimony of all this being done, all right? And I'll scroll through this so you can read the whole thing. Okay, so this, doctored reports on both WMD and Scud missiles, so they're manufacturing false reports, false evidence, misstated reports, both on WMD and Scud missiles, provided UN SCOM with false leads, leading the inspection teams on, in Ritter's words, wild goose chases, right? Conducted a concerted effort to obstruct and discredit the UN weapons inspectors, perhaps even get the weapons inspectors kicked out of Iraq. For example, the U.S. CIA had an ongoing program to assassinate or overthrow Saddam Hussein in a coup. They plotted to use the UN SCOM inspections to create an incident that would justify a massive attack upon the Special Republican Guard headquarters, which was Saddam's personal security force. With the Special Republican Guard out of the way, the coup would be launched. The CIA trusted questionable Iraqi double agents, right? And they passed information to questionable Iraqi double agents. Also, they lost a secure satellite communications system device, right, to the Iraqi intelligence acquired there, right? Both of which gave the Iraqis full advanced knowledge of our plan. Right? They knew that we're plotting this. They knew that we're going to use inspection to jam them, right? To get a false excuse to bomb them, right? They knew of our plot. The coup was set to occur in conjunction with the UN SCOM 150 inspection in June of 1986. It was intended that the June 1986 UN weapons inspection be used to create an incident that would be used to justify bombing of the headquarters. Well, I pretty much said that, right? Taking out Saddam's personal bodyguard force. Stripped of protection, Saddam would be overthrown with a coup. All right. Now, U.S. was attempting to use the inspections to gather intelligence for assassination attempts on Saddam. For example, the CIA embedded several structural engineers on the UN SCOM inspection teams to devise means of bombing presidential palaces to kill Saddam. Recall this. Recall that in 2002, when Saddam Hussein knew the pressure's on. This is right after 9/11. Let's see, 9/11. Yeah, it was It was November 17th, I believe, right? Saddam Hussein, he knows that a concerted effort here is being manufactured to make a move against him. So he says, "Please come back in, weapons inspectors." And then the very next day, Bush says, "No, we're not going to go with weapons inspectors because that threatens to split the support for taking military action against them." Right? And then they come up with, well, we demand that we inspect all your palaces, like they would be hiding all of the WMD, in the basements, whatever, of his palaces, right? And recall the Bush administration demanded that all Saddam's palaces be inspected, and then the leak came out that the CIA planned to use WMD inspections to assassinate Saddam, and then suddenly, Iraq kicked out the WMD inspectors when they had no WMD. Right? Why would they kick them out if they had no WMD? Now, can I prove this was a CIA game? No. The only way to prove it is to have a plan in hand, a document in hand. And you think I'm going to get that? Hell no, right? So I'll never get documentation on that. But I tell you, that's right up along the lines of a CIA game, right? To play perceptions. Because what happened was, when they kicked out those weapons inspectors, in the American public mind, he's hiding. Saddam's hiding. They got something, right? But from the Iraqi perspective, they're worried that they're going to use inspections to try to assassinate Saddam, right? That's a total CIA game. That's typical. That's not, out of the order. That's classic CIA crap, right? Ritter had developed a program to flush out counter concealment. He called it counter concealment, involving U-2 flights. So I said they have those U-2 flights flying over the area you're going to inspect, right? Iraq communication intercepts. So he wanted to have these communications teams, British teams that were embedded, hiding in Iraq, right, to collect the signals, right? And then, so you embed in Iraq, and photo reconnaissance analysis by Israeli intelligence. So photo reconnaissance, and I think cryptologists, right? CIA failure to provide assistance forced Ritter to seek assistance from the British and Israelis. The British. All right, so here's an example how the CIA screwed over Ritter as far as signal intel. All right. Scott Ritter requested that the CIA develop for him some really, compact, secure, and effective radio recording equipment, so that he can carry that on his person and not be discovered, right? And what they gave him was, like he said, it was a joke. It was like a big CIA, Radio Shack type, scanner, right? That didn't even, automatically scan through channels. You had to manually switch the channels, right? And he said, they made zero effort to get communications for him, right? They give him like a Radio Shack device, right? And if he tries to use that during the inspections, he's going to get caught. And if he gets caught, he gets accused and tried of espionage, for which the punishment is death, right? So he on his own, Scott Ritter on his own, gets a British intelligence radio intercept group to capture the communications, right? The British would conduct communication interception, and Israelis would analyze U-2 surveillance photos. The concept of the operation was to schedule surprise inspections timed with U-2 flights to provoke Iraqi communication and movement of material. So the idea is, right, you have them overhead, you have your radio intercept groups ready, right, and then you jab with an inspection. An inspection, right, was now not meant to find the weapons of mass destruction, well, that's a secondary. The inspection was hopefully to flush them out, to be like a bird dog, to chase out, and spot them trying to move and conceal, and then conceal stuff, right? The idea was to reveal the Iraqi attempts to conceal WMD. The communications intercepts would expose Iraq orders to move materials, right? The U-2 flights would take photos of any movement of materials. Then the U.S. CIA leaked the existence of the 5-man British intelligence unit inside to every American embassy and military base around the world. So somehow, this gets to every American military base and embassy throughout the world. It's like blabbed, right? Thus, it made it easy for Iraq intelligence to gain knowledge of this team, right? Any intelligence gathering unit embedded within Iraq would be arrested, tortured, and executed as spies. This forced the British to pull the plug in the unit. Ritter had carefully coordinated U-2 flights with inspections. CIA disconnected the U-2 flights from the inspections, making flights random and ineffective. Right? They would fly over the wrong location and on the wrong day even. The CIA also installed the wrong sensors on the U-2s, the scheduled flights over the wrong targets and at the wrong times, totally disconnecting the flights from inspections, obstructing Scott Ritter's efforts. So he's trying to get help here from the CIA, and they're sabotaging his efforts. Thus, the CIA destroyed the effectiveness of Ritter's design inspections. The CIA required a CIA agent to be present whenever Israel assisted in data analysis of the counter-concealment operations, but then never supplied an agent, effectively preventing Ritter from getting assistance from Israel. So they demanded, well, if you're going to get help from Israel, there has to be a CIA agent there, right? But then they never provided a CIA agent, so Scott Ritter could never get the help from the Israelis. The CIA pressured British intelligence to cease any communication intercept support. The CIA pressured Israeli intelligence to cease any photo reconnaissance data analysis support. The CIA processing methods of communication intercept rendered all data virtually unusable. They're like scrambling the communications, right? Making it impossible to use. The CIA provided UN SCOM with poor intelligence, providing false leads, sending UN SCOM teams on wild goose chases. Finally, in 1998, the U.S. attempted to use a fait accompli to obtain a casus belli, right, which is a justification for attacking or war. The U.S. CIA timed an inspection to occur in conjunction with a U.S. military strike planned to occur on March 15th, the start of a Muslim holiday. The plan was to choose a site highly sensitive to Iraqi national security that was known the Iraqis would reject, the Ministry of Defense, right, which is their Pentagon. This noncompliance would then be used to justify an attack. Tariq Aziz gave us the quote. Tariq Aziz gave us a reason when he told Butler that to try to inspect the Ministry of Defense meant war. This is a firm refusal to allow inspection there. During the inspection, however, the Iraqis eventually caved in, backed down, allowed Ritter's team into the Ministry of Defense. The inspectors found nothing. The Iraqis weren't stupid. They knew that this was a CIA maneuver to manufacture justification for a military strike, a pretext for attack, casus belli. That's my opinion here. I mean, they're not stupid. Come on, they knew this. They're jamming them with trying to get an excuse to attack. The counselor told Ritter, quote, after your inspection of the Iraq Ministry of Defense in March, he told me, the White House got fed up with the UN SCOM inspections. They were not interested in real disarmament, just the illusion of disarmament. UN SCOM job was to do only that which was necessary to produce 2 reports to the Security Council a year, which legitimized continuation of the economic sanctions. So that's Scott Ritter's opinion, right? The guy on the ground, the guy closest to all this, right? The guy who is directly interfacing with the CIA and their operations, right? And this makes sense. For why would the March inspection cause the White House to be fed up when it succeeded in forcing the Iraqis back? Why would they be fed up with the March inspection when it actually was effective at getting the inspection of the Ministry of Defense, right? And allowed the inspection of the Ministry of Defense, an area they considered so sensitive to their national security that to inspect it meant war. The U.S. conducted a bombing campaign in Iraq, lasting 4 days. So when this failed, right, and then in August, Iraq's quit cooperating, right? Then the U.S. and UN pulled out the weapons inspectors, and 4 days, lasting 4 days, the 16th through the 19th, right? One day before Ramadan, their main religious holiday, right? We bombed them, right? So we got their bombing on a holiday, nonetheless, and their big holiday, Ramadan. I bet they got the Iraqis all pumped up and inspired, for the religious observance, right? So I probably did a lot to get them all fired up. But that while the U.S. accused Iraq of having and producing WMD, after our invasion, it was proven that the Iraqis had no WMD program since 1991. That's a Dilfer report. Key outcome: the stranglehold sanctions on Iraq caused the death of 567,000 Iraqi children, and this was one of bin Laden's primary motives for attacking us on 9/11. All right, so I think I showed you this before. This is my quick analysis here of the reason why Scott Ritter says right up here. He said, listen, we found they didn't have weapons of mass destruction programs since 1991, right? We went in there, scoured the country for a year, right? And this was the report's conclusion, right? Now this only makes sense, right? So the purpose for these sanctions, which killed the economy, the sanctions prevented the export of oil. Oil is 60% of the Iraqi economy, 60%, which does not leave 40% behind, because losing that 60% kills a big part of that 40%, all right? Now, can you at all possibly compare basically your whole economy to weapons of mass destruction, right? Which is only one of many military assets. You have your army, you have your armor, you have your artillery, you have Air Force, Navy, you have anti-aircraft missile batteries, you have ballistic missiles, right? Then you got WMD, right? Right? How do you buy all of this? That's dependent upon this. And the importance of this is far more than just military hardware, right? I mean, you need that economy to prevent horrifying living conditions, right, and political instability in your country. And also, no doubt Saddam had in mind that if push came to shove, for example, they went to war with Iran again, right? Yeah, right. He can reconstitute his WMD making, right? So he could shut it down, right? But they still had the scientists and engineers, and that was the key means by which they could reconstitute it, if they needed to. So what I'm saying is, there's no comparison at all between the whole economy and WMD. Why would you sacrifice your economy for just this, one little thing, right? One aspect of your military. All right. So what I'll do is this. I'll scroll through this slowly, right? But I want to cover something else first real quick, because this is what liars will do, right? What liars will do is they'll try to attack this. They'll attack Ritter's credibility, right? They'll say, that's just his opinion, or he's full of crap, or they'll try to discredit him somehow, try to launch an ad hominem on him. And he says this. Ritter says this: if I went public with what I was alleging, the FBI would find a way to silence me, right? Well, they could do that, right? They can lean on you quite a bit, right? But from what I've seen, from my experience, what do they do first? First thing they try is intimidation. They try to spook you, to play head games, right? Right? I got tons of this, right? And then they start using leverage, right? They threaten you. Intimidation, they threaten your life, right? Then you realize, they're just, playing head games. They'll use leverage, right? Pressure you. They'll network around you, right? And they can network specifically with people and manipulate people around you, key people, right? They can manipulate your friends, right? They can get to coworkers. They can get to your boss, right? And then they can network all around you, just socially, right? And they set up flies all around to harass you, right? And they try to discredit you. They have so many means of manufacturing ad hominems, false attacks upon credibility, right? One of which is actually causing harm. They can harm you. They tortured me for 2 years, right? I didn't know what was going on. And then they hunted me down once I realized what was going on, right? And the whole time, they used that to discredit me, right? When I was being tortured, for example, when I was just being decomposed, right, suffering bad, right, all around me, people would laugh, like, he's faking it, right? I'm being tortured here bad, breaking down, and, as far as people know, I'm faking it. So during my 2 years of torture, when I was decomposing and suffering horribly, people would mock and laugh, right? It's adding insult to injury. Literally, you have injury here, and then people are adding insult to that, right? So, and that's the flies. Flies all around, right? Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. All right. Okay. So this is on the left here is Scott Ritter's direct quote words, right? I give page numbers. You can look it up. All right. And it says everything I said up here and more, right? And a lot more. So I'll scroll through it slowly here. And these are commentary on the right. You can read these too. I basically draw arrows when to read these. At this point, read this. At this point, read this. Oh, there's quite a bit to this. All right, so here's lies about Scud missiles. Let's get into lies here. More lies about Scud missiles. Yeah, so like I said, probably a likely method of attacking this would try to attack credibility of Scott Ritter, and if you create a wave in social reality, that's going to dominate. Especially if you make a joke of it. Laughs are always more powerful than facts and intelligence. About as intelligence as coughs and whistles. But that's good enough for people. this is all CIA obstruction of inspections, sabotaging inspections. There's quite a bit here. So a key thing that comes out is the British and U.S. were in cahoots, in close in cahoots, just like they were during the build-up to the Iraq invasion war resolution, right? Both were releasing false intelligence reports, timed together. So please read all this. All right, so that's that. Please read that. All right, so that's a fait accompli, right? And if you don't have this term in mind, when you're reading through history, you know, chances are you're not going to recognize this, right? What's going on? All right. So we said that culture is, key elements: culture are language, norms, values, material. And as far as the language, words are powerful. Words create your reality. It's called linguistic reality. The way we perceive things is based upon our knowledge, and our knowledge is based upon words, right? You also have linguistic relativity, which is if you have different languages or different language skills or just different knowledge levels, right? You're going to perceive things differently. And I've shown you many cases where things are perceived differently because people have different things in their head, right? And that could be intentionally manufactured to create misunderstanding and conflict, like in the multiple cognitive framework game. So perceptions are relative depending upon your knowledge and motives, right? Motives have a big impact upon the way you perceive things, probably even bigger than knowledge. Knowledge is based upon your language ability, especially complex knowledge. Examples, if a child doesn't know a word, he doesn't know the concept, and that will limit his perceptions, right? For example, fait accompli, ad hominem, a child's like, what? Right? Ad hominem is used all the time, over and over again. Do people fall for it? Yes, over and over and over. So another example is, remember I told you about the Trojan horse thing where in the Simpsons episode, the character, I believe it was Mo, said at the very end, from now on, every time we get wood, we'll think of Trojans, right? Now a child's not going to understand what that means, but an adult will laugh and giggle, whatever, right? Different language abilities, different perceptions. If one language does not have a word for a concept, they might not even understand the concept. For example, I give the example of Chinese. Chinese they don't have an alphabet, right? Chinese use these characters, right? And there's somewhere around like 6,000 of these characters. I mean, can you imagine trying to learn 6,000 of all these characters and trying to memorize how to write each one of these? But the idea is, if you're limited to the number of characters, you're limited as far as language. With an alphabet, right, you can make up any infinite combination of letters to make up a word, right? And you can use the prefix and suffix, so forth, to establish, pre-established meaning, right? To connect meaning. And so English, for example, with an alphabet, is unlimited as far as the amount of concepts you can create. This is limited, right? So in Chinese, for example, if they don't have a concept, a word for something, they may not have the concept, and that's going to limit cognition. So what the Chinese do, for example, and what the Indians do, they use a lot of American words. They just adopt American words for certain concepts today. Right. No alphabet limits the number of words. With an alphabet, there's unlimited words. Again, many languages borrow. Okay, so like I said, many languages borrow from English. All right. All right. So that's language. Now I want to get to norms. Right. We said that norms is something that the functionalists, focus upon here. Norms are normal accepted ways of doing things, normal accepted ways of seeing things. So it's not just doing things, normal things that we do, normal ways of seeing things. What we think is normal and right and proper, but also, right, it's how we tend to see things. It guides and directs the way we see things. And all right, so we said that our culture can impact the way you see things. Right, so this is the example here. All right, so there's norms for just about everything. They're so accustomed that they're taken for granted. We typically just assume them. Right? We take them for granted, right? But different cultures can have different norms, and I'll try to give you some examples that are maybe a little bit interesting, right? Back in like 1983, I guess it was, I went to Japan. My mom worked for United Airlines, and they just started flights, direct flights to Japan. And because she worked for United Airlines, I could fly anywhere that United Airlines flew for $10, right? So I could fly to Japan for $10. So when I was in college, I took some time off and went to Japan for about a month, right? Got one of those Japanese URL type pass, right? Unlimited pass for a month, and I just bummed around the country. And as soon as I flew into Japan, got off the plane, walking through the big airport, right? Big modern thing. And it's in Tokyo, and looking for a bathroom. Had to go to the bathroom, and so I see the signs on the wall. Right, there's a little a sign with a woman dress, and there's a sign with a man. So I go into the one with the man. You just kind of assume like okay, right, without thinking. And as soon as I got in there, there's a woman standing there, and like what? Holy crap! So I quickly walked out, I walked out, checked the signs, right? And sure enough, it's the sign for a man. I'm in the right place. So I kind of sheepishly go back in there, and then she's standing by the sink. So I just assumed that she must be like the bathroom attendant. And the urinals are right across from the sink. So, I'm standing at a urinal facing the wall, and she's like right behind me. And, it's probably just my imagination, but I'm thinking she's burning a hole through the back of my head, watching me, staring at me, right? So I got stage fright, and I couldn't go, and I stood at that urinal for like a good 10 minutes, and just desperately trying to go, but when you get all nervous, you can't. There's two sphincters. You have two urinary sphincters in your urethra, and one of them is consciously controlled, so you can control it, but the other one is sympathetically controlled. So if you get jacked on adrenaline, it's just going to clamp shut. So I couldn't go. Finally, I was able to, I came across the idea that if I whistled, right, it would, get my mind off of this, right, and then, especially given the fact that I can't whistle to save my life. I'm a crappy whistler, so I have to really focus and concentrate on whistling, and trying to focus on whistling, just going. I was able to get my mind off of her, and then I was able to go finally, right, and then I washed my hands, and she hands me a towel, and I'm like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And I just took it. Anyways, then another interesting thing. So that's interesting cultural difference about Japan, where they have women in the men's bathrooms, right? I'll tell you another bathroom story in Japan. All right, so like I said, I had a month to bum around the country, and I went to a town called Nara, which was their capital way back in around 600 AD, I believe. Right, so it's like an older city, right? And then I had like this tourist map with the cartoon pictures, right, and all the tourist attractions on this map, kind of like enlarging, right? And one of them was a big fat Buddha. So it was one of the largest Buddha statues in the country. So I figured, well, I'm here, I might as well go check it out. And so I go to this it's like like a national monument type thing, right? I go there, I go up and see the Buddha, and it's like 30, 40 feet high or something like that, right? Big stone thing, right? Big fat Buddha belly. Like, okay, so I saw that, right? I mean, it's like, I went all that way to see that, and walked all that distance, and then like, okay, fine, right? And then I had to go to the bathroom again, and there were two little buildings on either side of the Buddha, right? A little bit away. And I looked at it again, so I saw the signs. One had a woman's dress, and one had a man, so one in the men's. And as I was going through the men's, the first thing I saw were these toilets like this, where to go number two, instead of having like a porcelain white toilet, whatever that we have in the United States that you sit on, right? They had these little holes in the ground, right? And then there's no barriers between them, so you just kind of get together and I don't know, pull down your pants and squat over this, right, and talk about the ball game or whatever. I don't know whatever they do, right? And I'm thinking, my goodness, that's crude, that's primitive, right? And then so I was staring focused on this, right? And then just after this, these toilets are here. Just after that, there's like a wall here where you piss against a wall and it goes in the gutter, just like at a ballpark in the United States or something like that, the football stadium or whatever. And I figure, okay, I can handle that, right? So I unzip and I'm peeing against the wall here, right? And then I hear all this noise, all this chatter to my left, and I look to the left over here, and there's no fourth wall. Right, and so there's women and there's children walking past, right, and my first thought is, oh my God, right, and I turn to the side, away from them, so I was aiming this way, right, and then I'm looking back over my shoulder, right, and I'm watching them, and not a single one of them turned to look, right, and it's so, it's a different culture. It's like in America, if for example, children or women saw a man peeing in public like that, right? They'd be shocked, right? But over there, it's like it's nothing. They're so used to it. It's just another natural process, like breathing or eating or something. So, but my second thought was, so that was my first thought. I'm just shocked. Oh my God, right? And I got to turn around. And my second thought is, you build 3 walls. Why can't you build a 4th wall? And then it's a smaller wall. There's like a long wall here, short wall here, another short wall, but why can't you build a 4th wall? Yeah, it was just kind of ridiculous. All right, so different cultures, right? First time I went to a restaurant in Japan. I went to a restaurant, and good thing, I couldn't speak Japanese, but it was a good thing they had a display case with plastic copies of all the food, right? So you have this dish with shrimp tempura or sushi, whatever, all different things, right? This one with noodles, whatever, and you just point to the thing you want, right? And so I had a nice dinner there, and I left a tip, and I paid my bill, walked out, right? And I got like three blocks down the street, and I hear like pitter patter chasing after me, right? And this little Japanese girl is, well, she's a waitress. She's not like a girl. She, a young woman. She's running after me. I'm like, what the hell, right? And so she catches up to me, and she's trying to talk to me in her broken English. I'm like, what are you trying to say? And then I finally figured out that she's refusing to take the tip. And I said, no, please take it, right? That's what we do in America. And she was just adamant, not in a bad way, but just trying to be real polite. We can't take it, right? So, I mean, if it were me, and I would have pocketed that in a heartbeat, right? But in Japan, they very different culture. Bicycles. Here's another example of bicycles. I come from Chicago, right? You leave your bicycle anywhere in Chicago unlocked, it's gone in a second. I mean, literally in a second, someone's going to take it, right? In Japan, they have these, a lot of people bicycle because the population is so packed in Japan. There's so many people, right? And then, so roads are packed, right? And it's easier to just take a bike, right? A lot of people bike, and they have these big parking areas where you can park your bikes, and there's thousands of bikes, literally thousands of bikes, and not a single person locks up their bike. No one locks up their bike, and no one steals it. You go to a change machine, you go to a vending machine, right? This is another thing about Japan that's weird. In America, right, if anyone forgets to pick up the change at a vending machine, you just grab it and stuff it in your pocket, right? In Japan, if someone forgets to pick up their change, no one takes it, right? Out of the chances that that person who forgot it may come back, no one takes that change. It's crazy, right? There's a lot of goofy things about Japan. Um, let's see here. Yeah. Anyways, okay. Another cultural difference is even within, like I showed you a example. Even within the United States, there's little subcultures, right? For example, here in Dayton, where I live right now, the culture here, as far as crossing the streets, whether on bicycle or on foot, is totally different. In Chicago, the only rule is, right, don't get run over, right? Don't get your butt run over. But in Dayton, if the light is red, right, people will not cross that street, right? Even if there's no traffic, they'll just stand there patiently. And to me, that just amazes me. And I came over here in Dayton, and I tried doing that, but I just couldn't do it, right? If the light is red and there's no one there, it would just like pain me to sit to wait there. So I just go. All right, so different cultures here in America. Bike ride rule, okay. I have a funny example here. I don't know if this is really culture. I guess I'll give you this example. Here's an example, bathroom use type of thing, right? I went to this church near my house when I lived in Chicago area. I live in Fox Lake and up near Wisconsin. And first time I went to this church, I went to the service, and it's like, okay, that's pretty boring, whatever. Right? But all right, fine. And I was walking out, and on the way out, I walked past the bathroom. I figured, well, I'll stop in and use the bathroom. And I had to go number 2, right? So in this bathroom, typical men's bathroom, right? There's not that many stalls. There's only one stall. It was a handicap stall, so it was a big area. Pretty much blocked off the end of the bathroom, right? And there was one urinal, right? And so I went into the stall, flipped on the seat, and sat on it, right? And just as I was walking in, just as I was walking through the stall door, right? I heard the door to the bathroom open behind me, and I saw this old guy coming. He must have been like 80 years old, right? Just a real old timer. And so he's following me in, right? And I go into the stall, lock it, right? And I pull down flip down the seat, and getting ready to go, and sitting on the toilet. And then I hear in the door, "Can I come in?" The guy knocks on the stall door, right, and asks if he can come in. I'm thinking, oh my God, who does that, right? You usually just check to see if it's locked. If it's locked, then you say, okay, and you just wait, right? But he knocks and says, So I'm thinking that's goofy, right? So I said, yeah, sure, come on in. There's plenty of room, right? I mean, there's plenty of room in there, right? And then I hear, this quick pitter patter, and the guy. I spooked the guy, right? I freaked him out. So he runs out the door, this old timer, right? And I'm thinking, my goodness, that's probably like the first time in 30 years that guy's run. And anyways, I was kind of proud of myself that I got an old timer to run. All right, so another example of cultural difference is bathroom. Not bathroom, bathing suit gear here. And let's see. Got an example here, different cultures, right, and how culture changes over time. All right, so here's the hijabs, right? I mean, they're making a big deal about this in France, right? Okay, you can't wear these, public beaches or whatever, right? It kind of reminds me of the United States about the turn of the century. So this is kind of like a time warp back, to the American style of bathing suits back then, which were far more modest. This is the 1970s. I used to be a swimmer. This is the suits I used to wear. In fact, I had that suit right there. Big thing, back in this is the '72 Olympics when Mark Spitz won all those gold medals. I believe he won 7 of these suckers. I think he won 7, something like that. This is the women's suits back then, right? This could be more modern, I don't know. G-strings. But I'll tell you a story about this, right? These like whatever you call these like G-string type suits, right? Um, when I was a kid, about like a teenager, 15, 16 years old, my brothers and my cousins, and a whole bunch of cousins, right? There's a good about like 8 or 9 of us, right? Just young males, right? Kids, right? And we decided to go to a beach. Um, we went to a beach around here. Here's Belmont Avenue's right around here. Belmont Avenue, right? Okay. And we went to one of these beaches around here. And so it wasn't like a beach with the sand. It was a stone wall. So it was like a seawall type thing, right? But we just jumped in and went for a swam out for a little bit, right? And then once we got a little ways out, we looked back at the stone wall, right? And there was all these guys wearing these G-string bikinis, prancing up and down like they're models on a runway, and they're parading back and forth, and we were like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And sure enough, it was a gay beach, and this area of Chicago, like we said, different cultural areas. This is called Boys Town. This is where all the gays tend to move and congregate, right? Gay men, anyways. So we swam out of it pretty quick. We were a little bit homophobic back then, and we got a little spooked, so we got out of there. Now here's a modern competition male suit. So Muslim women's suits are like a throwback to 19th century women's suits, but it's also now more comparable to men's speed racing suits here for competitive swimmers. All right, so that's elements of culture, cultural change, right? And social influence I'll talk about. So cultures, can change. How culture trends and what's popular and what's in it can change. And when I was a kid in the '60s, models were extremely thin. This was like the standard of beauty, and today they're like just anorexic and sickly, right? So this is Twiggy, who was a famous model back then, right? Whereas today it's kind of gone to the other extreme, real skinny to really big butts here, right? And then this is we can go back to our concept of micro, meso, macro. So this would be a micro here. This would be more macro, big, and these would be more meso, right? And I would ask my male students in my classes, what are you guys? You guys micro guys? You guys macro guys? Or you guys meso guys? And I'm kind of a meso guy, right? I kind of like, meso female tushes, right? And I swear most of the young men in my classes are all macro guys. They like big butts, right? So that's more modern, I guess. All right. So that's how culture can change. Things change over time. What is the standard of beauty that changes? And I mean, there's variation between people, right? But still, overall, you have trends. And I give examples of how you can change culture. And one thing I was kind of proud of myself is I was able to change driving behavior at a school I taught. So here's a school, Monte Vista here. Here's an elementary school right over here. And when school let out, traffic would start from over here, right? The parking lot. Where's the parking lot? Here's a staff parking lot, but I think the student parking lot was back here somewhere, right? Anyways, so staff would be leaving, and then students would be leaving. It'd be a long line. There was a traffic light way up here. It'd be like solid traffic, car to car, bumper to bumper, just crawl, right? And then the elementary school parents would pick up their kids. There was like a U-shaped drive here, right? They would come in here and they would pick up their kids and they would wait here. And these people would wait here until all the students would leave. No, not a single student or staff would let these guys cut in, right? And I'm thinking, I'm shocked, right? Because like in Chicago, right? Not that Chicago's all manners and so forth, but the social thing is to you alternate. If you have like slow traffic here and these guys are stuck, you alternate. One let the guy in here, then another guy goes, and then you let them. Right? So you alternate, right? But there, they wouldn't let a single person in. They would just look at them and just ignore them, and these guys would be stuck there for like half hour, 45 minutes, hour, whatever it is, until that traffic left, right? I mean, it took a long time for this traffic leak because all these kids had cars, right? And then I was like, man, this is ridiculous. So I started letting people in, and sure enough, within a week, everyone was letting people in. So it's spread. So you can have an influence on culture. So that was the culture. Don't let anyone in, and that's my source of pride there. That I had an effect upon local culture here. All right. Now I'll give another example of how you get, of social influence. Here's another driving example. This is the Eisenhower Expressway in Chicago, running east-west from downtown, big expressway, right? Here's going west, here's going east, right? And in all these Chicago expressways, all right, that you have the entrance ramps and then you have the exit ramps, right? On the entrance ramps, you have stoplights. You don't have the yellow, you have a red and you have a green, right? And the idea behind this is when you have rush hour traffic and expressway is packed, right? When you come up to the stoplight, it'll be red, right? You got to stop there, and it'll just periodically turn green, so it lets people in one by one, kind of in a controlled, organized manner, right? And if there's no traffic, right? If it's not rush hour, if there's a weekend, no traffic, it'll be green, so you can just drive in, don't have to stop at all, right? Now, what I would do is I do a little social experiment. So as I'm approaching the stoplight, I'd always stop if it's red because I, tend to obey these. Well, I tend to roll through stop signs. That's one of the bad things. I don't go through red lights, but I tend to roll through stop signs. But anyways, if it's red and if someone's behind me, I'd see if they follow me if I blew right through. So if someone's behind me as I'm approaching that red light, I won't stop at all. I blow straight through, right? Now, 8 out of 10 times, the person behind me would follow me without stopping. So, normally everyone stops, right? I never see people blowing through but in front of me, right? Everyone just stops, right? If it's red. But just that little bit of social influence because I did it. It's just enough to get other people to do it. So 8 out of 10 times, if I blow through the red, the person behind me is going to blow through as well. All right, so we went through norms, normal ways of seeing things, normal ways of doing things. Those norms vary from culture to culture. There's a lot of differences in what's normal, right? And what's normal changes over time, right? Values, okay? So what are values? Values are what is desirable, what is a goal, right? What's right and wrong, all right? So values, I believe, are huge. Of these, maybe the most important of them all is values. Well, no, language. They're all important. Language is important. Values important, right? I think probably these are the two most important, though. Values are important because they guide behavior. What your values are determines your behavior, and behavior is huge, right? If you have so what are some values? What I did is I gave you a list of values here. Here's a list of values. All these values, you can look through these yourself sometime, right? But some examples of key values in our country are freedom, equal opportunity, right? That's a value we hold, right? Honesty, free speech, freedom of religion, right? Do we always follow these values? Not really, right? We talked about freedom of speech and how people, they want freedom of speech, right? But if you're saying something that you don't like, they're going to try to shut you up, right? All right. So equal opportunity. Let's take a look at that as an example of why values are important. All right. So importance of equal opportunity here. As I see it, it's one of the things that makes our country great, right? And it's these values that make our country great, not symbols, right? Values guide behavior. Only they make the United States great and good when we are great and good, right? Okay, it's our values that make us good. One value, for example, is equal opportunity, and I think this is not just fairness. I think this is for the benefit for our economy, for example, right? So if you have equal opportunity, that tends to increase incentive and drive, right? If you don't have equal opportunity, right, that can be a big disincentive, right? It can cause problems, it can cause, disruptions, it can cause, conflict, but anyways, if you have equal opportunity, and they say America is the land of opportunity, that can increase incentive and drive, right, which increases human productivity, right? Also, with increased equal opportunity, you have the increased capacity to develop the national pool of human talents and abilities. This is better human resource utilization, right? You want to maximize the use of human talents and abilities. You want to develop those abilities, right, to increase human productivity, because that results in greater wealth generation, right? And that results in greater aggregate income, right, which is the nation's prosperity, right? So the biggest resource is not oil or minerals, whatever, right? It's humans, right? Right? Who do things, who are productive, right? And the big factor in that that has made us a great economy is equal opportunity, at least a semblance of equal opportunity. Nothing's ever perfectly equal, but we tend to strive to that, right? There's a lot of efforts to strive to that. All right, so that makes us great and good, right? It's not just symbols. Symbols are powerful, right? But it's powerful because they impact upon emotions. They impact upon ego and pride. Symbols, I can give a rat's ass about symbols. What's important to me are values, right? Okay, let's see here. Let me give an example. So here's an example of those symbols are emotion, are driven by emotion, ego, pride, but that makes them super potent, right? These are powerful, right? So one example of symbols versus values are, Star Spangled Banner versus freedom of speech. This is kind of like the thing that's in popular, kind of a hot topic, I guess I should say, right? Example is, standing up for the Star Spangled Banner, right? For some people that's very important. For example, here's Coach Ditka, kind of a famous coach, right? He said to this Colin Kaepernick, get the hell out, right? Now, why was Colin Kaepernick doing this? Right? Well, he did it as a protest against excessive police violence against blacks, right? Now, I've looked at the data, at least the FBI data on shootings per arrest, right? And per arrest, right? Whites get shot just a little bit more than blacks during arrest, So whites get shot more than arrest. So as far as the objective data, well, he's not right about this, right? What they're seeing typically are what do you call anecdotal evidence. Just the news highlights some unarmed black person being shot or something like that, right? So they get all pumped up thinking, oh, they're shooting other black people, right? I mean, they could do that with Japanese. I'm Japanese, right? If they showed a lot of images of Japanese people getting shot, then I can say, oh, they're shooting other Japanese, But what you got to do is look at the hard, national data, right? And that shows that whites get shot just a little bit more than blacks, almost the same per arrest, like almost identical, but just a little bit more, right? So I disagree with this, right? But does he have a right to make a peaceful protest? Absolutely, right? He could be wrong, but he's got a right to freedom of speech, right? So who's really following the principles? Who's really following what's important, right? Not Ditka, right? He's saying, get the hell out. You don't agree with me? Get the hell out, right? That is against our values, right? And values are what make us great, not these damn symbols, right? Not a Star Spangled Banner. This is all emotions, right? But emotions are powerful, right? So freedom, First Amendment. So this is about First Amendment rights, freedom of religion, right? That's important. That's a value. Freedom of speech, freedom of press, peaceful assembly, right to do it peacefully. Is he doing anything violent against the law? No, right? Freedom of expression, right? petition, the right to petition the government to redress grievances. So this is the First Amendment here, right? And what's the purpose of these? What's the purpose of freedom of speech? So we can say any crap we want? No, it's defense against tyranny, right? That's the purpose of freedom of speech. That's why it's written into the Constitution as the First Amendment. We're the first democracy. We're the big experiment, right? Prior to this, they had all sorts of, monarchies and, dictators and whatnot. And, what do I say here? So, being born in America doesn't make you a true American. What makes you a true American? In my opinion, a true American isn't a person who gets all pumped up for, Star Spangled Banner, or whatever, right? Or the flag, or like an eagle, or whatever. Right? A true American is one who sticks to American values, right? So many people can get pumped up by like a symbol, a flag, or whatever, right? But they don't stick to American values. They stomp on American values. They don't care about real truth and justice and morality. It's about, self-promotion. So waving the flag doesn't make you an American. A true American is a person who upholds American values, right? If you uphold these, if you stick to them and uphold them, right, that makes you a true American. All right, so I want to take a look at, I made a chart here. All right, that fits, okay. American symbols versus American values, all right. I want to start with, okay. So here we have American symbols, here we got American values, right? Some American values are all men are created equal. That's damn important, right? You have equal opportunity, justice, hard work, right? This is the stuff that makes America great, right? People working hard, right? Freedom, right? Free enterprise. As far as economics, that's huge, right? Competition, right? Self-supporting, practicality and efficiency, productivity, honesty, helping others, freedom of speech, truth, morality. Right? Truth and morality. This is really important. Selflessness and sacrifice. All right. I don't know if they're really American values, but I wish they were. All right. Because I think that's the most important values here. Values that good soldiers will follow these things like this, right? Okay, so American symbols. What do we got here? How do I go? Okay, 2, 3, 4. Where's 4? Okay, so American symbols, they're powerful, right? Right? They're powerful. Things like the flag, national anthem, traditions like 4th of July, bald eagle, gets people all pumped up, right? They have a lot of strong emotions, right? But are emotions rational? Are emotions intelligent, right? No, they're irrational. They're blind, but they're super powerful, right? They get people all riled up. There's a big element of pride. Pride is huge. Why? Because pride is all about self. In fact, Oswald Chambers said pride is a deification of self, right? But pride is something that we like to do because we like to stroke our own egos, right? Part of that is, wrapping ourselves up in these symbols, all right? Patriotism, nationalism, right? Nationalism, for example, is not like something that's been around forever. It emerged largely out of the Napoleonic Wars, right? And the rise of nation states. And for centuries, the problem with this is, for centuries, clever politicians, clever leaders have used nationalism and patriotism to manipulate their masses into war, right? So you get all pumped up, and what are you doing? You're stroking your ego, right? And it gets people all pumped up for war, makes them easier to manipulate. Pride, narcissism, excessive love of self, right? So this is all relates to self. Patriotism relates to self. Pride is self. Narcissism is self, right? American symbols, there's ego identification. There's self-serving bias. We distort the way we see things to help us, see things the way we want to see things because it makes us feel good, right? Ego identification. That's a big part of patriotism is ego identification. Build up the self, make us feel good. Now, is the self a good thing? No, the self is our fleshliness, right? That's the push that I explained to you, all right? also results in distortions. Remember we talked about self-serving biases. It results in distortions, the way you see things, right? To support your agenda or what you want to believe. It results in bias, dishonesty, right? Often leads to the betrayal of American values. So these things, right, lead you to betray the real values. All right. This is what we got to stick to: American values, because only that makes us great and good. All right. Now, as far as selflessness, I don't know if you ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of moral development, but selflessness is how you attain the highest level of your moral development, or self-actualization is denying the self. Okay, so that's values. Values are important. It's values that makes our country great, right? It's values that make our people noble, to the extent they are noble, right? Don't you cling to your selfish. Well, all right. So let's talk. The last one is material. So we said that culture, things are language, norms, values, and now we'll look at material, right? It's the stuff that we make and the stuff we use, right? Right. That's a big part of our culture. That affects a lot of things in our culture. Let's see. How do I want to do this? Right. Increasing sophistication of our materials, increasing sophistication of our control of materials, right? What we can do to make stuff, and that has a big impact upon our society, right? The nature of our society, for example, when you look at materials, well, the guy who talked a lot about that is Marx, right? Remember, that was his main focus, where Weber said, no, values are a real thing. Values are important. I believe values are more important than material, but materials are important, right? The Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, these are different ages where we had different controls over materials. This is way back then when we didn't have, whether smelting processes, whether purification of metal processes, right? You had to use stone. You had to chip stone to make spears and knives and whatever, right? Bronze Age, you're getting a little better control of materials, better, Now then there you have the Iron Age, and then now we're in high tech era, right? So each of these has an effect. They affect the tools that we can make, the weapons we can make, right? Machines that we can make, and they affect the commodities that we make from all this, right? Which and it also affects the means of production, how we produce things, our economy, how empires are formed. Marx's analysis, how you can control the resources and so forth, right? You control power and you form empires. Okay, so now the materials have a big effect on our work, right? So a lot of people are work with computers today, right? They do their analysis on computers. They design software and so forth, right? Right? 100 years ago they didn't have any of that. Computers really didn't start coming into play until 1930s and 40s and so forth. And even then they're really primitive, right? Normally with those punch card things. So it affects work, type of jobs that are available. It affects leisure, what we do for recreation. I mean, they didn't have big screen TVs and so forth back then. They didn't have all, cell phones, automobiles, right? It affects, what leisure. I like skiing, for example. They didn't have the materials and the designs for skis way back, I don't know. In the 1970s, for example, the 1960s when I started, it was very primitive, leather boots and cable bindings and all sorts of wood skis, all wood, except for a metal rail and a little plastic on the bottom. All right, affects daily living. Right, so the materials in the world affects the type of homes we make, how the homes are built, the quality of homes, the insulation, the finishing materials. Right. It affects the type of appliances in our home and flooring and carpet and everything, right? It affects transportation, it's no longer you have to walk everywhere. You have to use a horse and buggy. right? We have cars, rails, trucks, and airplanes, and communication that affects how we communicate. You didn't have to like just yell across the yard at your neighbor. That's about all you can do, right? Or write a letter, right? You now have you have instant access to anyone across in the world if you have their number, right, with a cell phone. Affects the clothing we wear, type of materials. Affects any fabric, right? Most food, it affects the type of food, quality of food, bioengineering, resistant to mold, bacteria, resistant to bugs, healthcare, the quality of our healthcare, the extent to which we can really treat people with, MRI machines or so forth, right, or medications and whatnot. All right, so here's examples. Here's a laptop, here's a cell phone, right? Here's zit cream, here's a pill. Looks like probably Benadryl or something like that, right? All this stuff, right? Material has a big impact upon all this. All this has a big impact upon our lives, right? We take it for granted. All these modern conveniences, whatever. Technology. Okay. So what drives our material change? Well, increasing knowledge, right? We talked about knowledge builds, right? Better tools, right? Affects what we can make. Better understanding. Division of labor. Increased control over materials through whatever process, different. Better understanding how processing. For example, let me give an example. I think a new material that's going to be huge in the future is graphene. Right? Graphene is like a wonder material. It's a single atom thick layer of carbon, right, bonded in a sheet. Right? It's super strong. It's like 20 times stronger than steel. Right? It's flexible. It's the most conductive material in the world for both electricity and heat. Right? So you can see how you get to the point where you can make cooling fins or even pots and pans or electricity. Well, here's an example. It's transparent, right? And we're going the way of renewable energy. The area of technological growth is going to be probably in solar. That's where you're going to have the biggest potential for technological growth and development and lowering of cost, right? Making energy production cheaper and cheaper, right? And in the short future, you're going to have every damn window can be a solar panel, right? And just imagine like a skyscraper that is covered with windows, right? Every skyscraper can be a big, huge power plant, and you could do that by with selective control over materials, right? You whatever it is, perovskites or whatever material it is, it can be transparent, and it'll allow the visible light through, so it's transparent. You can see through it, right? But it'll capture ultraviolet, right? And you convert that to energy, as well as infrared heat, electromagnetic energy, convert that to energy, right? So it's a solar panel. Windows are solar panels, right? Now to transfer the electrons, instead of having like a metal lattice grid, right? Even though it's like a fine grid you can see through, right? You don't need that at all. All you need is a layer of graphene in there, right? And that'll transmit the electricity far more efficient than any metal, right? And it's transparent. You see right through it, right? So stuff like that is coming, and it's because we can control our material environment. What is graphene? Graphene is just carbon, right? I don't know. Look at a lump of charcoal. That's what it is. It's not going to be expensive to acquire. You have to process it, and what's going to bring down price? Technology. What are the factors in price? So I lay it out here. Factors in price are technology, right? Increasing production process, improving production process, right? And improving supply streams, refining our supply streams, and then production volume, right? Also, market dynamics, business models and so forth, right? You come up with better ways of structuring the market, right? So those are the key factors in price, right? And graphing's going to become cheap, once we get this better figured out, and it will. Okay, so that's it for culture. We said culture is four main elements: our language, norms, values, and materials. But there's more. So I give some more here. It could be like style of dress, food, religion. The impact upon culture to varying extents, right? In varying places. One nation, a nation. Even within the United States, there's wide variation in adherence to religion from state to state. It could be, your beliefs are part of your culture, your behavior, right? And each of these can affect each other. Traditions, right? Other aspects of culture here, education, media, entertainment can affect that, right? God can affect religion. So these are other elements of culture, right? But the four main elements are language, norms, values, and material. And I think I've given you enough on that. Okay.